I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, so before you research where to start before you start, how many of you have ever thought, I want to learn about my family history, but I have no idea where to start? Today, I'd like to show you the best genealogy research actually begins before you ever search for a record, before you visit an archive, before you open ancestry.com, before you type your ancestor's name into a genealogy website. Some topics that I'll cover on this short presentation. Well, I'll identify the first steps to take before beginning family history research, organize family documents, memorabilia, develop a simple research plan, and how to ask better questions, and create a practical roadmap to begin your family history journey with confidence. So my story is I had already discussed it earlier. I wrote the book Last Ship to Freedom. We intentionally prepared and organized the diaries and all the information in it, memorabilia that went along with them. We organized that before I even started writing the book or doing anything with it. We spent several months simply just reading, translating, organizing, creating timelines, identifying names and places, and making a list of many questions. We just basically started, we looked in our box of stuff, basically. Start with what you know. Start with yourself and work backwards. Many beginners want to jump straight to a famous ancestor or an immigrant, but you really need to start building one generation at a time, starting with yourself. Write down facts, not assumptions. This is something that is a valuable lesson early on. People often say, my grandma was born in Russia. I was talking with Stephen earlier. He said his great grandfather, I believe, was born in Russia. They didn't know exactly where in Russia, and I don't know if he's found documentation. Has it actually been in Russia, or was it Ukraine, or is it a different country? Oftentimes you hear your relatives saying where they're from, and until you find documentation, you don't know for sure. So you have to kind of separate between family stories and documented facts. Record what you know and how you know it. My mother told me. So it's written in the family Bible. I have a birth certificate. This introduces the concept of documenting sources without making it feel technical. So it's always good to make a little note like that. It also helps to identify the gaps in your knowledge. Those gaps naturally become the research questions. And for example, in Lydia's diaries, what I knew was that my grandmother's name was Lydia Komarkov. She immigrated to the United States in 1922. She kept diaries. She lived in New York State. What I didn't know was where she was educated, who were her classmates, who were all these people that she mentioned in the diaries, and what happened when she left the ship. So the next step is to gather everything. Gather everything you have in your house. You can see I've got some boxes of random letters, postcards. I think I have my grandfather's lease to his house or his purchasing papers. There's shoes in a shoebox. Not sure why we have those with my genealogy, but that's still part of those. Those were my grandmother's shoes. Death certificates, photographs, all sorts of, don't underestimate what's already sitting in your home because that old box in the closet may contain clues that no website will ever have. And these are some of the items that we gathered for, and specifically related to the diaries. We had the actual diaries, of course, documents, some pre-revolutionary money. We had a samovar. We had a sewing machine. One of the families actually brought that sewing machine on the ship with them when they lived on the ship for 18 months. Shark tooth. The painting there is of the steamship. Old photographs. These are over a century old now by this point. The next step is to organize your research. You start from macro and go to micro. Um, that is the strategy that I use. Just if you're overwhelmed with all the box of stuff you have, put all the photos together in one pile and don't even look at them. Just put them all in one pile. Don't even look at the documents. Just put them all in one pile so that when you're ready to micro organize, you can look at all the documents and you can put them, put all the birth certificates together, put all the death certificates together, or put, all of the paperwork and photographs that belong to one person, that kind of thing. And that is really helpful um, when you are organizing your information. And it's also important, you don't have to organize everything perfectly before you begin. The important thing is to simply gather it in one place. You can organize as you go. Progress is better than perfection. Build your family tree. That the next step is to create a family tree, starting with yourself. You can see I have my basic family tree here. I'm down there at the bottom. I have my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents. I can go a little further. My 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 paternal grandfather, I can actually go pretty far. And that happened a couple years ago, and that was super exciting. But the other branches, I don't really have much more than what you see there. Do you know the names of your four grandparents? Do you know the names of your four great grandparents? Do you know your 16 great grandparents? You know, and then ask who, where, when, why. There's so many questions that you can ask yourself that you want to know. Then here's some ancestral mathematics. We're talking about math tonight with our game. Well, here's some math right here. um, you have, two parents, four grandparents, eight great grandparents, and you can kind of read down to your 15th great grandparent. So for you, in order to be around today, you have to have 100, you have about 131,015 great grandparents, which is the number blows my mind away. And for a child born today, a Mayflower passenger who arrived in 1620 would likely be somewhere between your 12th or 14th or 15th great grandparent, just to kind of give you an idea of that. And, genealogy is about discovering which path through this enormous family tree is yours and uncovering the stories that go with it. And then start asking better questions. Instead of asking, I want to learn about my family, ask more specific questions. Who were my grandparents? Where were they born? When did they immigrate? What church did they attend? Just to give an example of a few questions. For example, my first question when we opened up my grandmother's diaries was, what happened on the ship? We just simply wanted to know, what was it like living on a ship for 18 months? I think even at that time, we only thought she had lived on it for a year. And then we're surprised to learn that it was actually 18 months. And as we got deeper into the diaries, we had a lot more specific questions, like who were these people? Who was the captain of the ship? What responsibilities did my great grandfather have on the ship? Where did the ship sail in the Black Sea? And why were they on the ship to begin with? These were all questions that we've answered pretty much all of those questions, but of course we have a million more. So now, once you've organized everything, you're ready to actually do the research. On your websites, there's ancestry.com, there's Family Search, there's MyHeritage, there's, so many local archives, there's records, relatives you can ask. There's so many avenues that you can do. Do your DNA, that helps as well. Um, so here's a little, family history action step, if you will. Before you begin researching, take a few minutes to answer these questions. And if you want to take a screenshot of it and answer them later, that's fine. I'm kind of rushing through this a little bit, but, what are three family history items that you already have? Like, can you think of three items, like a family Bible or a certain photograph, or just a letter from a relative? And then which is one person that you should interview, that you would want to interview. I always recommend interviewing the oldest person in your family because they're a wealth of information of the generation before, and they're the only ones that probably know any of those answers. And, unfortunately, all my grandparents are gone at this point, and it's too late to ask them. And my mother's the only one, the oldest one living now. She's 85, and I've decided I'm going to do her story next. So, I've got all sorts of questions for her. So I hope she's ready. And then, what is one question that you want answered? Do you want to know specifically, like when your great grandfather came, or what city or what country did your great grandfather arrive in the United States from? What was the name of the ship they came on? A lot of that information you can find clues in that dusty box of documents or photographs that you might have in your closet, and look online to see if that'll help. And then what is one small step that you can take this week to start organizing your genealogy or your family history information? So one surname mentioned only once in one diary eventually led to descendants, photographs, friendships, and ultimately this book, Last Ship to Freedom. None of that happened because I found the perfect website. As a matter of fact, most of the information was not on a website. It happened because I took the time to understand what I already had and to organize it. And family history will just end with family history doesn't begin by searching online. It begins with the stories, photographs, and memories that are already in your hands. Thank you very much for your time.
Sharing, and I can bring everybody back.
I
It's
hope
been
I
a
didn't do
long
that too
night,
fast.
but that was a fantastic
Thank
presentation.
you. That was great.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Yes.
you.
So Elton wanted to just go back to make the announcements. So I just want to, so that's our bookstore. So if you need any books, they're all there. And let me stop sharing and stop recording. All right. So Elton's going to end us with